Canadian judge just halted the deportation of a non-binary American. And it's a landmark ruling that could set a huge precedent for trans and non-binary US citizens seeking refuge in Canada amidst the Trump administration's continuing attacks. Here's why it's such a big deal. This week, federal Justice Julie Blackhawk ruled that Angel Jenkel, a 24-year-old multimedia artist from Minnesota who's engaged to a Canadian, can remain in Canada while their case is judicially reviewed, rather than being sent right back to America. Basically, people facing deportation from Canada can request a pre-removal risk assessment by Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, and if they're deemed to be at real risk of persecution or serious harm if they're deported back to their home country, they can be allowed to stay. And Jenkel first came to Canada as a visitor in 2022. When they had that risk assessment, they represented themselves, and they were initially denied the ability to stay in Canada. However, in this week's ruling, Blackhawk said that the immigration officer who carried out Jenkel's pre-risk assessment had a flawed approach and, quote, failed to consider the conditions in the U.S. for trans and non-binary individuals when assessing the risk of being returned. That line is huge. Translation, the immigration officer didn't factor in how dangerous America is to trans and non-binary people right now. And to be clear, it's pretty dangerous. Trump's administration has declared that there's only two genders and is in the process of weeding out DEI initiatives and mentions of trans people across federal jurisdiction. And all of this is also emboldening anti-LGBTQ+ hate and misinformation. In an interview with the Globe and Mail, Jenkel described the current climate in the U.S. as, quote, scary, and said that they're afraid of persecution for being non-binary if they were to return. And now, thanks to this ruling, they don't have to, at least not right now. But what could this precedent mean for other trans and non-binary people seeking refuge in Canada? Rainbow Refugee Society, a group that provides support to LGBTQ+ asylum seekers, says that they've received over 1,000 emails since Trump's second inauguration from queer and trans Americans inquiring about how they can claim asylum in Canada. But there are currently no special pathways being carved out by Canada's government to account for the significant increase in queer and trans US citizens who no longer feel safe in their own country. And this ruling could start the ball rolling on something. A Toronto-based immigration lawyer told the Globe that this ruling indicates a change and will set a precedent. Quote, "This is an acknowledgement that these changes are serious and that this is something that has a material effect on trans and non-binary individuals." What comes next? Well, this is just one case, and it doesn't change the way Canada accepts refugees currently. But it could very well inform future rulings and approaches, or even spark acknowledgement and change from Canada's federal government to work to open Canada's doors to trans and non-binary Americans facing persecution.